Hi, my name's Deborah Bottomley. I'm a local artist. I live in Milford, but I used to live in Framingham, and that is how I became associated with the Framingham Artists Guild. And we've been asked to hang shows here, and so this show actually is all my work. Later on, you may see some work from other members of the Framingham Artists Guild, but I encourage you to check us out and come and join and see one of the meetings. We meet normally on the third Wednesday. Look for the website. We'll post the actual websites in case I get it wrong. Look for that, join them. And then also I'm a member of Blackstone Valley Art Association, and they have their meetings in Uxbridge. And you'll also hear me talking about the 140 Arts Collective, which is also now coming out of Upton, and they're a new group that is beginning to form. And they're hoping someday to be able to turn that into their art center. When I moved here in '97, it was about in 2000, that I realized I needed to get myself in more of a structure to try to get my painting back going. It was a closeted art. So what I did was go to the Keefe Tech, and I signed up for one of the watercolor classes, and that was Joan Rubin's, and it was a great class. Check them out. But her class was run from the very beginner to the very experienced. A lot of people had been taking the class with her for years, just because it gave you that outlet. It gave you that habit of going every week and doing a little bit of painting. And the artists were, you learn from everybody when you work in a group like that. And so it's a good thing to do. So that's where I got started. I work in a lot of mediums. I work with watercolor, which this first painting here, Equity, it's part of my They'll Know We Are Christians by Our Love series. And the toilet paper holder actually is a cast iron piece that I have gathered over the years. I picked it up from a place I worked in my 20s. And so it's one of my favorite items. I just like old rusty things and the art that they used to put into something as simple as plus it's advertisement. Where do you buy your toilet paper? The Equity, of course. The next painting is a pastel. And I, a few years ago, realized that I was silly not to be taking advantage of taking some classes from one of our local pastel pros in Sudbury, and that's Jean Rozier-Smith, who some of you may be familiar with, does amazing watercolor, or waves, and it's all dry pastel. So this is an example of a pastel. This next watercolor is actually a recent one, but I'm very happy with this because it is my mother with her aunt when we would go to visit her at the nursing home that she stayed at. And I like this painting because everybody recognizes it as my mother, and it caught her spirit. And so it's always a kind of a challenge when you're doing portraiture and figures. You know, sometimes you just end up with a person, you know, but it's nice when it actually reflects the person that you're trying to do. So this was called Value a Visit because I also, at that time, I was in my 20s and 30s, and I had my VCR camera. And I would go and tape people as they would sit and visit to just get some of those stories and things. The next painting here is called Fractured. This is part of my J6 series. And as an artist, I kind of have to use my art, if it's painting or music, in order to get some of those troubling feelings out. And so this was part of a reaction for J6. I also have a series where I'm doing a lot of the favorite people I've known. And down in Texas, this is Harry, and he is now passed, but he's a good friend of my sister's, and we were out at his farm. We were cutting down wood cedar to turn into planks. And so Harry was just one of those, he looked like your typical Texan cowboy farmer, and he was just watching the herd come back in for the night, and the storm was starting to grow. And so that's my reaction to that one. The next painting is Upton Center. This was also done with the Blackstone Valley Art Association and the Mass Culture. They had a grant. Mm-hmm. And so this is a program where different towns, we would go in, and you were given a town. I was given Upton. So, as you can tell, it was winter. I took some pictures and worked on things at home. And this is a painting where the Blackstone Valley Art Association, they have a very talented and dedicated crew there, and the president does all these videos. And she came and we videotaped me painting this, and also the painting that supports the 140 Arts Collection. The next painting, also a watercolor. This is called You Are My Sunshine, and it's a memorial painting for a friend of my partner's who, they were lifelong friends, but he died. He was a bass player, and the flowers were from his memorial. And I'm also a musician, and so the little Victor, Victrola, and all of those type of things are things that I just wanted to have in there to represent him. Mm. And then morning paper, again, a watercolor, is this one. I'm also working on my signature with the, I'm blanking here, the New England Watercolor Society. So that is a bigger group that now that I have the days more open, I can participate in a lot more of their programs. So this is one painting that was accepted in their national shows, and gives me a point toward that signature. And so I'm up to 3 points. I need one more. But this is my partner, and typical in the morning reading the paper. And what I like about painting is you can bring yourself back to other places and memories and things. And for instance, that lamp that you see in the painting is not the lamp that is in our room, but it's a lamp that means I have a sentimental attachment to it. It was something I grew up with, but it lives in one of my other sister's homes. So it's my way of having a memento. Plus it's a lot flatter and easier to move. And this last one is a charcoal, and it is called Newton, and it was from a photograph of my grandfather. And they thought it was pretty funny and risque that he was reading this Esquire magazine for men, because he was a strict Methodist teetotaler. But the thing is that I was just in my probably junior or senior year, and we had received this photograph as a Christmas gift. And up to that point, I pretty much thought I drew like anybody else, but it was the detail in the photo that made me just want to imitate that and get into those nooks and crannies and things. And when I first started coming back to watercolor, I was working totally different. When I was in college was the first time I was introduced to watercolor. And I worked, Andrew Wyeth was my favorite, and he worked with a limited palette. So I worked with a limited palette, and part of it may have been also it was more economical. I didn't have to buy as many. But when I did start back up, I wasn't quite sure what colors I wanted. You know, there were 162 in just one manufacturer's, and I kind of went crazy. I gave myself a limit, and I was just buying a mix of different colors. So one of my palettes has got just kind of a continual rainbow. Other palettes of mine, depending on what I'm doing, like I have one that's just more of a traditional Winsor Newton. And then I have one that is just all the staining you get into all the characteristics of the watercolors themselves. So that's kind of fun to play with and exciting. I used to work in silkscreen for years, and I had the earlier from that training of mix more, and you know my eye must have been trained. You know, and you kind of self-train yourself, and that's because I would look at things and I'd think, well, how would I mix that? And I think, okay, I'm going to start with my phthalo blue, and then I'm going to extend it, and I'm going to do. And so I mentally, I remember friends, I'd be staring out the window driving, and they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm just trying to figure out how would I paint that? You know, how would you paint that darkness and as it rushes by and things." But so now I'm just enjoying the fact that I get a little bit more time to spend time, because I've been kind of saving up all those supplies, and I like to bounce around with different mediums. For me, color's always been very, you know, for one thing, exciting, and you know, you see it in stained glass and just the power of color, and that's what I still strive to, you know, can I emulate smoke? Can I emulate this shining or that, the sun rays and stuff? So I'm always giving myself kind of an assignment. Right now, a lot of things I'm working on is just glow. One day I'll sit down and update my website, and you'll be able to see that too. Excellent. But you can go to deborahbottomley.com. Well, I hope everybody comes down to possibly come and see the show and support your local art groups and support your local cable TV.
Thank you. Awesome.